Behind Greatness is a podcast series exploring the journeys and personal insights of successful leaders, anchored on themes of resilience and leadership. Each interview aims to inspire listeners to stop at nothing short of their dreams. Brought to you by Inspire North, a nonprofit organization connecting youth with today's leaders. Ready? Let's get inspired.
So, welcome to another episode of Behind Greatness with Inspire. Today we have a special guest, and his name is Frank Ferragine. Frank, also known as Frankie Flowers, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here.
So, Frankie, before we get into it, quick bio for those of us and for those of the listeners that don't know you. So, Frankie, there are a few things to know, and we're going to find out a little bit more than just a few things throughout the show. But Frankie's part of the Toronto's favorite morning show, Breakfast Television. He is a 4-time best-selling author, and he's North America's favorite gardening specialist. Welcome to the show, Frank.
Hey, it's great to be here. I like to help people grow things. I like them to get dirty. I like to motivate people to get out there, garden. That's the best thing.
Okay, so as long as we're talking about gardening when we say dirty.
Well, growing things, yeah.
Frank, so I gave a 15-second bio.
Yeah.
And I know you have a 15-minute bio.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll edit that in afterwards. But Frank, let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
So you live outside of Toronto.
Yeah.
In the hinterland.
Yeah, well, Bradford, Ontario, known as Canada's heart of the vegetable industry.
Huh.
So my father and grandfather, kind of interesting story. They went from Italy. Mm-hmm. After the war, my grandfather was a prisoner of war to England. So they lived in England for 7 years, and then they came to Canada in 1956, ended up in the Holland Marsh working for a farmer. And from that, they established their roots. And with that, now they have a very vibrant business that my father's with, along with his sister and 3 other brothers. And they are doing exceptionally well, probably one of the top 5 growers in Canada, actually voted as one of the best garden centers in Canada, one of the best managed companies in Canada. I'm super proud of what they've accomplished.
You gloss that over like it's almost not important, but that's wonderful.
It's huge.
And you mentioned Holland Marsh.
Yeah.
So Holland Marsh, for, again, listeners who don't know or don't live in Canada or Ontario, the province of Ontario, but Holland Marsh is one of the most fertile bits of land in all of Canada. Is that right?
Yeah, it was actually founded by Professor Holland, not by somebody from Holland.
Oh, wow.
So there was a canal placed around it to drain out the water into black soil. And that black soil right now currently grows things like carrots, onions, you'll do collards, kohlrabi, Swiss chard, bok choy, all those. I have a couple family members that are there growing, Riga Farms, Nazo Farms, Tony Ferragine and Sons. There's a whole bunch of different ones that are there. It seems like one family member came and they all just came thereafter. Yeah.
Well, that's a wonderful story. Frank, your story is also one that's very interesting. So we've gotten to know you over the last number of years. Mm-hmm. So you've been a friend of Inspire and a speaker for us in the past as well. So we thank you for it.
It's awesome.
And you are. So thanks again for giving your time to come on the show on the episode. So I'm reading here my notes as we go because when we spoke earlier last week, mm-hmm. You gave me a little bit of info that I thought maybe we could recall during the show as well.
Sure.
Because you're a guy who's very modest, and I want to make sure that folks understand that Frank is more than just a pretty face on TV and an entrepreneur and a best-selling author and all the good stuff.
I shower too. That's the only reason why I'm a pretty face sometimes.
Well,
yeah, it's makeup. Thanks to Tracy and makeup at the station.
Excellent. So that's one of 2 of us that did that this morning. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start then from your beginning.
Yes.
So you grew up in Bradford, Ontario, which is north of Toronto, which is a big metropolis in southern Ontario in Canada. You are in media now. Mm-hmm. You are an entrepreneur. You're an author. Mm-hmm. How did that start? What started your media trajectory, if I can call it that?
So if you look at back in the background, when you're growing up in a family business, and my father was the one that would be working, but my mom did books out of the family business. March break, summer school, summer holidays, I would say, even long weekends were spent working with family that were there. So over the course of many years, it just seemed that was a really natural progression. But there was a period of time where my grandfather at that time said, we need a lawyer in the family. So I went off to York University as I was the first Ferragine boy to graduate from high school.
So
And
this is York University in Toronto.
yeah, you got York University. So I went there and did my undergrad program. After completing my undergrad program and applying to that time to Osgoode Hall, we had opened a new store up in Barrie. So my father then says, hey, I need somebody to help. Just take a year off and come help. So that's exactly what I did. And I think that's where the entrepreneurial spirit comes in, is really you have to do what it takes just to make things work. And at that time, we really had to focus, and that's really what it was all about. So I went up there, and in that time, I really said, hey, over time, this is my passion. Initially, when you're growing up, you say to yourself, I never want to do what my parents do. I don't want to fall in that realm. A lot of the times, you want to do your own thing. But then all of a sudden you identify that being in the outdoors, you love plants, you love growing, you love really getting people motivated to do it because you can give a lot. There's a lot that comes out of that. So during being at the garden center, all of a sudden we started doing ad campaigns, and the only person that could, they joked, would speak without swearing would be me. So I started at the new VR, which is now CTV2 in Barrie, Ontario. Doing gardening tips on a weekly basis. From those gardening tips, I started volunteering at the station, learning about the station. I produced my own show for CHCH in Hamilton, Ontario, that we did 13 episodes for. And then from that, things just kind of continued to grow. We did another show called Grow TV out of Barrie. And then I started being a regular guest on City TV's Breakfast Television as a garden specialist.
Downtown Toronto.
Downtown Toronto as an expert. And then all of a sudden I was offered the job to do weather there. And from that, it just kind of continued to grow. From that now, I've been on the Dr. Oz show a couple times in the U.S.
Wow. When was that? When were you on the Dr. Oz show?
About 3 years ago. My son's actually appeared on the Dr. Oz show as well.
Wow.
When we did some things about cleaning your fruit properly. But I was on there for a book that I did with a homeopath doctor, which is Bryce Wild. We did a book called Power Plants. So I took care of the medicine on how to grow. He took care of on the medicinal side of those plants. And so really what happened was my passion, number one, was plants. It took me a while to figure that out. And then with that passion, I got to share it. And then as soon as you started to identify that you enjoyed it, then you needed to explore. And it didn't come easy. There was a lot of it was volunteer work. A lot of it was putting yourself out there. And a lot of it was believing in yourself. And if you love what you're talking about, people will listen.
Well, so let's back up, because that's also a theme I think we should touch upon, because you speak about that often, at least when we speak one-on-one. Let's go back to your first experience. So you mentioned you threw in the word volunteer. So what did that mean to you? You started to volunteer your time at a TV station. Because why? You wanted to challenge yourself? You wanted to get into media? Because your love was growing, was plant life, was being in the outdoors, and you start volunteering in something that it doesn't obviously show as a correlation to anybody who's listening.
So initially, right away, I thought about audience, and I thought about one of the ways to spread a message and to reach that audience is through this thing called TV. Now we have this thing called the internet and social media.
What's that?
And yeah, we have all these other things. But at that time, TV, radio, and I was writing articles at the same time for a local paper. I was doing radio tips at the same time. I was really trying to build audience and build following I wanted to get people to buy plants and to really grow. That's really what I wanted to do. When I started doing TV, I was really interested. I thought it was really great where you can take something and build it into a story in these pieces, and really it's a recipe. So gardening is really a recipe as well. And so learning that recipe through volunteering and working with the camera person, pulling cable, sitting in with the editor, learning a little bit about audio, learning about lighting, and then eventually editing my own stories, all of a sudden it made me a more rounded person in terms of my presentation skills. And then it allowed me to share a passion. And it's continued to do that. And with that, it's opened up many doors. It's made me travel to many destinations. One year I went to Holland with the International Bulb Council. Who knew that there's a council for bulbs, flower bulbs, in Holland? And they called up and said, hey, do you want to come to Holland and check out some bulbs? And so we did Holland and Belgium, and I got to shoot a show around it. Wow. And it was fantastic.
So let's go back to law school.
Yeah.
So you were in law school.
I didn't go.
Oh,
I was
right.
accepted,
Okay.
yeah.
You're accepted, but the call of the wild, so to speak, came.
Yeah.
Is that something that you regret, or is that something that you would have wanted to pursue, or is that something that you felt obliged to pursue?
I think it was something that I felt obliged to pursue at that time.
Okay.
No regrets. whatsoever. I think I could have been a decent lawyer. I don't think I would have been a great lawyer. I have some friends that are great lawyers,
Sure.
and personality-wise, totally different. No regrets. It was something that I think helping people is something that I've always been interested in.
Okay.
And I thought that law at the time was a way to have knowledge to help and maybe figure things out. But then it was a lot of independent work, being by yourself, being in an indoor environment where I wanted to be outdoors. I wanted to be around people.
Sure.
I wanted to be around things like plants that don't talk back.
And then you had a family, so that kind of went down the drain.
Yeah. Well, and the real truth of the story as well is that in 1994, so it was 1993 that I had graduated university, and that was the summer that we had started the store. In 1994, I went out and bought my own home because interest rates dropped to 12% at the time. I had saved enough money, and I was intending on buying a Jeep at the time, but I had a really interesting talk with a gentleman who said, don't buy the Jeep, drive that crappy car you're driving, and go buy a house. And I wasn't going back to school, so I bought a house, and with that I rented the 2 bedrooms upstairs, stayed in 1 bedroom, and then rented the basement out. And then I bought a couple other rentals, and at that time I was learning about rentals, and my father would say, why are you doing this? These people, and I would say to my father, I'd say, Dad, when you have employees, you're paying them, and they're going to complain to you. When you have a rental a renter, or somebody that's renting from you, they're paying you, and they may complain to you just a few times. But just remember, they're paying you.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned a lot. I was
Good
young.
perspective.
Yeah, I learned a lot about people at that time.
Well, so then on that note,
Mm-hmm.
because I want you to share as well your flair for business.
Mm-hmm.
You are an entrepreneur as well.
Yeah.
You've had a few projects. I know that you're working on a couple of new projects at the very least.
Yeah.
How was that woven into your life as a media personality, as an author, as a family man, as a help to your family business, because you are a proactive help to your traditional family business? What are the projects that you're working on right now? Let's start with that. What are the projects that you're working on right now, and how have those developed? So maybe it's one and the same question.
Yeah, so one project that I have right now, which is a plant line, which is called Easy by Frankie. Easy by Frankie is a selection of plants that are really easy to grow for sun or shade. That's something that I'm doing with Longo's, which is a grocery store that I adore here in the Toronto area, in the GTA.
It's a grocery chain here.
It is a grocery chain,
Yeah.
family owned and operated by Mike Longo, Rosanna. I've known the family, so I grew up with them down at the food terminal, so we have a close connection. And we're also doing that with some garden gallery stores. They're independently owned garden centers. So with that, it's allowing me, number one, to help people with their gardening experience. It's not really a necessary moneymaker at this point whatsoever, but it's helping me extend and build my brand, which is Frankie Flowers. So it's one project. I'm also looking to create a podcast on my own. That podcast on my own, I'm thinking and playing and thinking out loud. One of them is doing a Q&A, garden Q&A. The other one would be one which is an industry one, kind of telling people behind the scenes of what's happening in the world of growing at this moment. And growing is everything from cannabis, which is unbelievable what's happening there, to...
You call it, sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
you call cannabis, I have a note here.
Yeah.
You call cannabis the gateway to gardening, is that?
I do, because I think that people are going to be trying to grow cannabis plants that would never have gardened before. And
Sure.
my hope is that they're going to have success and love it. And then all of a sudden they're going to grow tomatoes and basil. And so to me, this opens up a whole brand new audience. Also, cannabis puts a lot of funding in place for innovation and technology and growing in greenhouse environments that then can be applied into tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, different things. So then we can do innovations in robotics and grow better plants, because Canada is a really great innovator of food growing. But when it comes to growing, it's vertical gardening. It's growing in urban centers. I do a project called Elevated Eats, which is a volunteer-based project that I do where we're growing food on top of roofs. And with that, it's not only to elevate people's education on growing food, but also we donate all the food grown towards food banks. So we are elevating people's food knowledge on growing food, and then people's food choices. And I've been doing that project with Yorkdale Shopping Centre and Oxford Properties. Oxford Properties owns properties right across Canada and some in the U.S. So it's something that we can do that overall, in terms of an entrepreneurial spirit, that's a give back, but there's always things that always grow out of every give back. So with with me working with Oxford, I also right now do all the interior plant design for many of their malls. So it's all of a sudden become, I've done something that's a give back, and now it's making me some revenue back.
So I know you well enough. When you say when you give back, you receive. You talk about something that's very important to us and to me as well, is always have good intentions. Mm-hmm. So for any, let's bring it back to the 20-year-old or the 22-year-old, or for that matter, the 40-year-old listening to this, who wants to glean some information, some insight. When you have good intentions, how is that any different than going out to network in order to get something back, or going out to network for the sake of networking? What is the point of doing one versus the other?
So you're the only person that goes to sleep with yourself at night. So when you go to sleep with good intention, and you know you went out in the world with a good intention, then it actually gives you that point of peace in your mind that you actually went out with a really good strategy. Good intention as well, as I'm very much, you think about the book called The Secret. It's really truthful. You put positive vibes out and you put positive people around you. And really the whole basis of Inspire is all that, is to inspire others. Well, it's really neat. When you start inspiring others, you get inspired. And then that really creates some creative flow. I have to say as well, and confession is that I'm not perfect in every manner. I had good intentions for a marriage that right now I'm trying to navigate through that at this moment. But that's just, I have 2 beautiful kids out of that. But I don't want to give people the impression that I'm perfect, because I'm not. But I always had the best intentions.
You're perfect for us.
Well, I try my best. I do really do. Yeah.
That's very nice of you to say. It's very authentic.
That's key. I think there's nobody, even when somebody looks perfect, they're not. When you do a morning show and every morning you have to go on there and say it's a great day outdoors, or you're with a smile on your face, there's lots going on in people's minds. And just remember as well, when you're waiting in a coffee shop line and somebody's a little bit aggressive, you don't know what's happening in their life. You don't know what's going on in their life.
Sure.
So sometimes when you say to the person, "Are you okay?" it's amazing the reaction you get back. But intention is really where you can guide yourself to be in a really positive place, so that when you lie in bed, like when I lie in bed at night, I say to myself, did I win today or did I lose? And if I had good intentions through the day, I won.
Well, in the long run, it looks like you're still winning.
I hope so.
Speaking of authenticity and sharing lessons, you talk a lot about your kids.
Yeah.
So I want to bring that up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'll preface that with a piece of advice that was not given to me, but that passed me by during a conversation. I had to stop the conversation in order to hear it again. And the piece of advice went something like this. And it's one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard now as a 45-year-old father, right, in all my life, is teach your kids never to look for your approval.
Mm-hmm. We talked about that before.
We have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know with your kids, you're a guy who likes to learn from your kids as much as you like to impart knowledge and communicate with your kids.
Yeah. When I think there's lots of learning with kids because they are so innocent and they see the world through different glasses than what we see the world. So it's really interesting. They'll always ask you a question that stumbles you. Kids today have a lot of distractions that are out there. The one thing is that they need to be approved by themselves. It's self-affirmation is really important. And to instill that, I believe my kids go to school where the theme is I can, I will. So if I can, I will, if that's the thought of the school, and I love that, if all of a sudden they're looking for my approval, it's not I can, I will. It's I can, but what's my dad going to think? I can, but what my mom going to think? I can, but what are my peers going to think? No, it can't be like that. It has to be I can, I will. And the key is to believe in yourself, whether you're a father, a business person, a student, or just somebody's child. If you don't believe in yourself, you're never going to succeed. And that's what I love about with that quote as well, is don't raise your kids to look for your approval, because they're always not believing in themselves. They're looking for approval from others.
So for me, that's there's a fine line there too, because I'd want my kids to learn from my mistakes without sounding like I'm preaching to them or I'm giving them a lesson. And I feel like that's what I'm always doing. I'm going
to say change your mindset. So
okay, go.
Change your mindset. You're a coach. So
I wish. Go on.
well, no, and I coach my kids in sport, and so what I've learned about coaching your kids is they don't listen to you as much as other people's kids listen to you.
Oh, absolutely.
But what you can't play the game for your kids, but you can help coach them with the plays. You can give them recommendations. You can give them suggestions, and as long as you're doing that from an area of kindness, you give them the ability to hear from you. I think they're always going to think that we're preaching at them. I think that's it, even though we don't want to. I think that will always come off, but we are really just their life coaches. And we have to, as a coach, we have to discipline. And to me, every action has a reaction. And I always say to my kids, as long as people don't think you're lazy, that's the number one thing for me. I always say to them, if somebody says, that guy's a hard worker, you're always going to be respected. You can be the smartest guy in the world, and if they say you're lazy, you're not going to be respected.
Very good point. Because people will listen to you if they don't think you're lazy.
Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's kind of self-evident, but when you say it there, it's that's fairly powerful, at least for people like me in my stage in life, which is much like yours with a young family. That those things ring important. But you say something that's also very important, and it's a word that's kind of cast aside a lot in our society as a word that connotes weakness. And the word that you mentioned a few minutes ago was kindness.
Mm-hmm.
So let's transition from being a coach to your kids to being your own coach in your career and your learning experiences. You have a ton of stories, and I know we don't have a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
But in this episode, I'd love to hear some of your stories, because one of them also includes the killing with kindness kind of lesson that's helped you along in your business. Do you know which one I'm talking about? About a mass merchant?
Oh, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, so that's an interesting story. So that was when I was working full-time in my family business. And at that time, we came up with a national plant brand for Canadian Tire. I can mention that company, which I've worked with for many, many years, and I adore all the dealers right across the country.
Sorry, and Canadian Tire, for the listeners, is a national chain or kind of a home improvement or home...
Everything.
It's
it's not just tires.
Yeah.
One of their themes was get started with us, so everything from sporting wear over to getting your car fixed, all the way through to a beautiful garden center. So they actually have a great garden center on the one side. Dealers right across the country, usually the dealers themselves are within the community, very passionate. So we came up with a plant line, and that plant line was really highly successful. I created a grower network, so meaning that we grew in Ontario. I had growers out of Quebec, out of Vancouver, and I had one located in Alberta as well. So with that network, we had national distribution. I took care of the specs and standards to make sure the plants were grown a certain way. We did tagging, merchandise, marketing, everything. Hugely successful. After it launched and it sold out, all of a sudden one day I got to work at my family business, and there was a big stack of papers. And that stack of papers was a lawsuit not only suing my family business, but also naming me in the suit from a U.S. mass merchant. And in the end, what happened was I did due diligence on that, meaning that I actually had already trademarked, I had already done my work, did trademark searches, worked with a great trademark lawyer out of Ottawa called Jack Smuggler. I still use him to this day. Great name, too. I love that name, Jack Smuggler.
Jack Smuggler.
And with that, what happened was it turned out that U.S. merchant didn't actually do a lot of their due diligence. So in the end, with kindness, we had a discussion, and we found out the grower is somebody who we work with through a plant breeder. And through that discussion, what happened was we found that they were more invested in that name and in that brand than what we were. So we mutually came to an agreement where they bought that name off of us. And then we had the ability just to create, there was only 1 year of investment in there, so we continued that success thereafter. And we have a great working relationship with that grower in California, but today.
Wow.
And that mass merchant, which I will not name, which I love today, is someone who I work with on the marketing side, and I've done several in-store events for, and I actually think they're a fantastic mass merchant. But it was super intimidating when you're being personally sued in your mid-20s by a huge company.
So maybe you didn't need to go to law school to be a good lawyer.
Maybe. Always do your homework. I'd say that to my kids.
Don't be lazy.
Yeah.
Don't be lazy.
Yeah, and protect yourself.
You mentioned another story in one of your other talks as well in some of our chats. I hate to use this word because it it's we don't want to dismiss anything, but it's an important part of developing your brand and developing your stories as well, right? Professional story is the word luck.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned one of is it one of your auditions for?
It was a great So City TV, breakfast television.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, I think everybody needs luck for success, but you need to take that opportunity. So that day that I auditioned for breakfast television was in February. I'm celebrating 15 years this year.
Congrats.
At breakfast television, City TV. The morning of my audition, it was out on the street on Queen Street West, 299. We were out, and it was a cold day, and there was a gentleman while I was doing my audition with a Santa Claus hat on, no shirt on, doing push-ups behind me, going behind me the entire time. His name was Xanta, Dave. To this day, I'll give Dave a shout out. He, I didn't really react to him, but I acknowledged him and just kind of made it a part of my weather story. And with that, I think because I was able to kind of handle that, I was given the job, because I really feel that he showed me that I could handle the streets, because here's a guy from a small little town called Bradford, Ontario. How's he going to do the big city? Well, I grew up at the Ontario Food Terminal selling plants with my father. And if you've ever been to the Ontario Food Terminal, there is a colorful group of people that are down there that you'll have billionaires that are in the food industry, and you'll have people unloading trucks. And you meet everybody in between, and you don't have any fear when you're down there, because there's very colorful language.
It's a great learning lesson.
Yeah.
And Santa does bring gifts.
Yeah, Xanta.
Xanta with a Z.
Every day is Christmas, he told me.
So you're also an experienced and well-known interviewer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, can you share a story of somebody that you interviewed, and we don't care necessarily who, but somebody you interviewed that would have taught you a lesson as well?
That's a really, everybody you interview, you learn a lesson. So I find even when I'm going on Live Eye, or if I'm in studio having a conversation, and even it doesn't matter whether they're a person that comes to the TV station, even when I go to talks and things like Woodstock, Ontario, small communities, I always learn a garden tip or learn something about what's happening in that community. So it's really hard to say that's one. There's people that have inspired me along the way that I feel that there's an energy that comes off them, and you almost feel better after you talk to them. Bob Geldof was recently in, and even though I didn't personally do the interview, I got the chance to speak with him. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely fantastic, a fantastic person overall. Dr. Oz himself, when meeting him, he was an amazing man. And I always have to say one of my favorite people of all time is Richard Branson. Richard Branson is somebody who didn't have an entourage that came. He was totally just really level-headed overall. He was witty. We were in the bathroom together, and we made a joke because I said, "Oh, look, there's a sword with his knight. There's a knight with a sword," and he had a good little laugh there. So probably not appropriate, but it was kind of funny at the time.
Still did it.
He still did it. But I think that every time you talk with somebody, if you listen, you'll learn.
If you listen, you learn. So I have a couple of other things to say and maybe ask. So one of them is about gratitude. Mm-hmm. So you could argue everything that you've shared with us came with kind of a dose of understanding that we should be grateful for the opportunities we have. What's the most important thing for you outside of your family? Mm-hmm. What is the thing that you are most grateful of?
Life. So, and I'll say that with some little context. So in 1998, my brother passed of cancer at the age of 22. I was 26 years of age at that time. And I feel that he shared a lot of stuff. And the reason why I actually went outside of the family business and did things outside of the family business was life is too short. And with that, sometimes we often mourn those who have passed, but we should really live to honor those that have passed. So I'm grateful to live, and even though every day there's speed bumps along the way, I'm really grateful, and I actually try to take the time to say that was a beautiful sunrise, and that's a beautiful sunset, and to take in those little moments. And as you get older, and some of the younger people listen to us, yeah, it sounds a little kumbaya, I know that, but in time you'll understand it. And we really live in an unbelievable time, and really with gratitude, it'll ground you. I've met people from all over the world that are famous to not famous, and we're all the same. You know, my father says a great quote: remember never to step on any toes, because one day they're going to be connected to the butt that you have to kiss.
I want to meet your dad. Maybe we can have your dad on the podcast.
Oh, no.
That's a lot of food terminal talk.
Oh, yeah. No filter. That's the After Hours podcast for Inspire.
We can make that happen. I'm sure Reno here, who's producing everything and making sure that we're doing this the way we need to do it, can make it happen.
Yeah.
No?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it'd be funny.
Who inspires you the most?
Right now, it's my boys. Like I would say to you, at this current moment, I'm learning so much from them. You know, they're my oldest, Gavin, has so much passion. My youngest is a passionate kid that they both have huge smiles. And honestly, that's super inspiring. Having kids, totally, all of a sudden you look through the eyes of a child again. And then you can see how innocent they are, and then how life kind of changes them along the way, and how they lose that innocence. But they teach you that, you know, when they fall, they get back up, and that's what you have to do. And I truly think that that's really what it is right now, is that inspires me. And it's what drives me, and what makes me me. But there's not just one thing that inspires me. The history of my family, the people who I've met along the way, and then just health. Like the one thing I didn't really mention is I've become somebody that really, really admires eating in a great way, living a great way, and working out and honoring myself. So as much as I like to give, in order to give, I have to make sure I'm good.
Frank, you're a tremendous human being.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
No, thank you. This is, we could talk for hours on this, because I learn from you every time we chat. Doesn't matter how short the chat and how early morning. For listeners who don't appreciate this, Frank gets up at, 2:30, 2:45?
2:45. There's
Every
never,
morning.
ever any parking. No, there's always parking. I never have to wait to get gas.
Wonderful. You just don't have to sleep, that's all.
Yeah, there's nobody around, just me and some naked people walking up and down Toronto. That's a whole other day.
Well, Frank, again, thank you for coming by. Thank you for being part of the episode. So last thing, if anybody wants to see you on social media, what are your handles?
So if they want to email me directly, it's Frankie with an IE at frankieflowers.com. If you have any garden questions, any questions whatsoever, at Frank Ferragine on Instagram and Twitter. And you can go to Ask Frankie Flowers on Facebook, and you'll see a full Facebook page there where you can ask anything about gardening or anything in general. And just remember, I'm the one that tells the weather. I'm not the one that makes it.
Wonderful. Frank, thanks for being you.
Thank you, man.
Hey, it's Enrico Colantoni here, actor, director, and dedicated napper. Like what you heard today, there's more to come. Make sure to subscribe to Behind Greatness and learn about our live events at inspirenorth.com. You'll also find links to our social media right on our website, so be sure to give us a like and follow. Until next time, stay inspired.